At my wife's ultrasound appointment, the doctor's hands began to shake. He set the probe down, his face pale, and said words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Sir, you need to leave immediately and call a lawyer." My first thought wasn't legal, it was life. I asked him if something was wrong with the baby. He leaned in close, voice barely above a whisper. "The baby is fine. But what I'm seeing on this screen," he didn't finish. He turned the monitor toward me, and in that moment, my marriage ended. I left without a word and never looked back. My name is Daniel Harris, 36 years old, project manager from Austin, Texas. I'm not the type who panics easily. My whole career has been about precision, timelines, budgets, risk analysis. I solve problems by staying calm, by seeing patterns before anyone else. That day in the doctor's office, calm was all I had left. Because when I saw that ultrasound screen, I knew the problem wasn't medical. It was betrayal. Amanda and I had been married for 5 years. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. We met at a friend's barbecue, one of those Texas summer nights where the heat sits heavy even after the sun goes down. She laughed at one of my dry jokes, and I thought I'd found someone who understood me. We married a year later, and when she told me she was pregnant, I believed our story was still on track. Until that screen told me otherwise. The doctor didn't spell it out in words, but he didn't have to. What I saw was impossible, details that didn't align, measurements that didn't add up. My mind cataloged every inconsistency the way it always does, storing it for later analysis. I didn't argue with Amanda, didn't confront her in front of the doctor. I stayed silent, thanked him for his time, and walked out. On the drive home, Amanda's voice filled the car, trying to cover the air between us. She asked why I was so quiet. She said I looked pale. She laughed nervously and said the doctor was probably just tired, that sometimes machines gave strange readings. I kept my hands on the wheel, eyes straight ahead. I didn't respond. My silence was my weapon now. When we reached the house, she disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door harder than she meant to. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the dark window, and wrote 3 words on a piece of paper torn from the notepad by the fridge: observe, collect, respond. That was how I would handle this. Not with shouting, not with accusations, but with quiet precision. The same way I'd dismantle a flawed system at work. Methodical, controlled, patient. Because one truth had become crystal clear. The baby wasn't the problem. The marriage was. And from that night forward, Amanda had no idea just how much silence could reveal. That night, after the ultrasound, Amanda pretended everything was fine. She cooked pasta, poured wine she barely touched, and talked about baby names as if nothing had happened. Her words ran together, forced, rehearsed. She wanted noise to drown out what the screen had shown. I gave her none. Silence pressed between us heavier than any argument could. When she went to bed, I stayed in the living room with my notebook. I didn't write feelings. I wrote facts. The due date she had told me. The last work trip she claimed to take. The nights she said she was with friends. I mapped it all out, lines crossing like a project plan I'd built 100 times before. And like those projects, something didn't add up. The doctor had said the baby was fine. That was the one steady point. But fine didn't mean mine. The measurements told their own story, one Amanda hadn't written for me. The next day, I started gathering. Quietly, methodically. I checked our shared bank account. Transfers I hadn't noticed before. Cash withdrawals she couldn't explain away with groceries. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Nights she said she was working late. Hotel receipts buried in the statements, disguised under generic merchant codes. Each one I printed, filed, labeled. Proof. Amanda noticed my calm more than she would have noticed my anger. She asked why I wasn't talking. She said silence was crueler than shouting. She begged me to yell, to at least say something. I didn't. I let her hear her own voice echo back at her in empty rooms. At work, I was the same Daniel everyone knew. Deadlines met, meetings run, no cracks in my surface. But beneath it, I was running my own private investigation. I pulled phone records, traced calls made at odd hours, numbers saved under harmless names. One stood out, repeated late at night, always ending abruptly. I wrote it down. By the 3rd day, Amanda started slipping. Her tone shifted from cheerful to sharp. She accused me of sulking, of punishing her. She said I was overreacting to nothing. But nothing doesn't leave patterns. Nothing doesn't pay for hotel rooms. Silence forced her to fill the void, and the more she spoke, the more she revealed. That night, she tried a different tactic. She came into the living room, sat next to me, and placed my hand on her stomach. She said the baby was ours. She said love was stronger than doubt. She said trust was the foundation of marriage. I kept my hand there, feeling the faint movement beneath her skin. But inside, the silence held. My father used to tell me that truth doesn't need defending. It only needs time to reveal itself. I was giving it that time. The baby wasn't the question anymore. Amanda was. And every quiet step I took was leading me closer to an answer she couldn't escape. On the 4th day after the ultrasound, I widened my search. Amanda's patterns were no longer just financial. They were social. People leave traces when they lie, and I intended to find every one of them. I started with her best friend, Claire. For years, Amanda had used Claire as her alibi. Girls' night, brunch, movie marathon. I had never questioned it. But now, silence made me curious. I checked timestamps on photos Amanda posted, the ones where Claire was supposedly present. They didn't align. Claire's own social media told a different story. Vacations, family dinners, evenings in. More often than not, she was nowhere near Amanda on the nights Amanda claimed she was. I printed screenshots, slipped them into the folder. Another piece of proof. At home, Amanda grew restless. She followed me from room to room, her voice climbing. She said she hated this version of me, the quiet one, the cold one. She said silence was worse than betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. I watched her, listened, and wrote nothing down. Words weren't necessary anymore. The silence was working better than interrogation ever could. By the 5th day, Amanda changed tactics again. She made herself busy, too busy. Cleaning, reorganizing closets, scrubbing surfaces that didn't need it. She was filling the air with motion since words no longer worked. But distraction is another kind of confession. The more she scrubbed, the more she revealed what she feared I might uncover. That night, I checked the number I had traced from our phone records. It belonged to someone named Ryan Mitchell, a colleague from her office, one she'd mentioned once in passing but never again. His LinkedIn profile painted him as harmless, project consultant, divorced, mid-40s. But late-night calls don't come from harmless places. I didn't confront her. I didn't call the number. I documented. Dates, times, duration. All lined up in black and white. By the 6th day, Amanda was unraveling. She accused me of spying, though I hadn't touched her phone. She said I was imagining things, that I was paranoid. But paranoia doesn't explain hotel receipts. It doesn't explain late-night calls. And it doesn't explain a doctor's trembling hands. At work, I wore the same calm mask. Colleagues saw no change, but inside, I was piecing together a puzzle Amanda didn't know I was building. Each lie she had told was a missing piece falling into place. And every silent day made her more reckless. That evening, she tried once more to force words out of me. She stood in the doorway of my office at home, her eyes wet, and said I was scaring her. She begged me to tell her what I was thinking. I didn't answer. I simply closed the laptop and walked past her. The truth didn't need my voice. The truth was already speaking. And soon, Amanda would hear it louder than she ever imagined. By the 7th day, Amanda's panic was no longer hidden. I could see it in the way she checked her phone every few minutes, the way she jumped when messages came in. She was waiting for something, someone. My silence had turned her world into a mirror, and she didn't like the reflection staring back. That evening, she announced she was going for groceries. It was late, almost 9, but she insisted. I didn't argue. I just nodded, made a note of the time, and watched her drive away. Minutes later, I pulled out my laptop. Months earlier, I'd installed security cameras around the house after a break-in on our street. Amanda had never questioned them. What she didn't know was that I'd also set up GPS tracking on our shared car through the insurance company's app. For discounts, I had told her. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. I opened the app. The little icon of our car moved across the map, not toward the grocery store, but toward a hotel off the interstate. A place I'd already seen on her credit card statements. My jaw tightened, but I didn't curse, didn't slam the laptop shut. I just watched, documented the time, the route, the destination. Proof. She returned an hour later, carrying a bag of groceries she'd clearly picked up just to complete the story. She smiled too much, asked if I wanted tea, tried to act casual. I simply said I was tired and went to bed. The silence worked better than any accusation. On the 8th day, She was jumpy, restless, shadowing me around the house. She tried to draw me into arguments over small things: laundry, dishes, the bills. Anything to make me break. But silence doesn't break. It bends, sharpens, and cuts deeper than shouting ever could. That night, I checked the camera feed from the living room. At 2 a.m., Amanda slipped out of bed, phone pressed to her ear. She whispered into the receiver, pacing the room, unaware the camera caught everything. I couldn't hear the other side, but her words were clear enough. She said I was distant, that I wasn't talking, that she couldn't take the pressure anymore. She begged the voice on the other end to be patient, to trust her. Then she ended the call and stood in silence, staring at the darkened window, trembling. I replayed the footage twice, cataloging every second. Another file in the folder. By the 9th day, Amanda was unraveling in front of me. She dressed with more care, as if appearances could rewrite truth. She spoke softer, as if gentleness could erase lies. But silence doesn't forget. When she asked if I trusted her, I finally gave her an answer. Just one word. No. Her face crumbled, but I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. Silence had already said everything. And soon, it would be time for her to see what I'd been building in the dark. On the 10th day, I began assembling everything into one place. Every receipt, every bank statement, every call log, every video clip from the cameras. I organized them into folders, labeled with dates, cross-referenced with notes in my handwriting. It wasn't chaos. It was order. The kind of order that leaves no cracks to slip through, no space for excuses. Amanda noticed me working late into the night. She asked if it was for the office. I didn't answer. She pressed harder, accusing me of shutting her out, of plotting against her. My silence gave her nothing to hold on to. And when silence leaves no handholds, people start to slip. That evening, she tried something different. She cooked my favorite meal, lit candles, wore a dress she hadn't touched in years. She smiled, but her hands trembled as she poured the wine. She was performing, hoping to reset the stage. But performances don't erase patterns. And I had documented them all. While she cleared the dishes, I quietly uploaded the files to 3 separate cloud accounts, each secured with passwords only I knew. Insurance. If Amanda thought silence was dangerous, she hadn't yet seen what preparation looked like. On the 11th day, she cracked again. I came home from work to find her sitting in the dark, eyes swollen, mascara streaked. She asked if I still loved her. She begged me to say something, anything. I set my bag down, met her eyes once, and then walked past her. Not cruelly, not angrily, just with the weight of someone who no longer owed her words. That night, I printed the ultrasound report the doctor had given me, the one that had started everything. I placed it at the front of the binder I'd built. It wasn't just evidence, it was the spark that revealed the fire. By the 12th day, Amanda's fear had shifted. It wasn't fear of losing me anymore. It was fear of what I knew. She hovered around my office, tried to peek at my papers, even tested my laptop password. Each attempt I noted, calmly, adding to the pattern. Proof of her desperation now layered on top of her betrayal. She accused me of playing games. She said marriage wasn't a courtroom. But she was wrong. Marriage is a record of choices, of actions, of truths revealed when silence cuts through the lies. When she demanded to know what I planned to do, I finally spoke. One sentence. You'll see soon enough. Her face went pale. She asked what that meant. I didn't answer. Silence filled the house again, heavier than before. Because the truth wasn't ready to be spoken. Not yet, but soon. And when it came, Amanda wouldn't be able to hide behind smiles, dresses, or candlelight. She would face the system I had built out of her own lies. On the 13th day, Amanda's calm facade shattered completely. She stormed into my office at home, grabbed the binder off my desk, and tried to pull it open. I let her. She flipped through pages of statements, screenshots, timestamps, trembling as her eyes darted from line to line. Her voice cracked when she said I was destroying our marriage, that I was twisting innocent things into something ugly. I didn't argue. I just took the binder back, closed it, and set it aside. Silence again. The kind that stung sharper than any accusation. That night, she packed a bag. I watched her drag it down the hall, her footsteps loud and uneven. She paused at the door, waiting for me to stop her, to ask her to stay. I didn't move. She left, slamming the door behind her. Minutes later, I heard her car pull out of the driveway. Through the tracking app, I followed her route. Straight to the same hotel as before. Same room. Same lie. Proof confirming itself in real time. I saved the data and closed the app. The next morning, she was back in the kitchen, the bag gone, her tone forced light. She asked if I wanted coffee, as if nothing had happened. I didn't respond. My silence forced her to sip her own words. She filled the space with chatter, desperate, meaningless noise. But the more she spoke, the clearer the truth became. By the 14th day, Amanda escalated again. She called her mother, who left me a voicemail dripping with blame. She said Amanda was pregnant, stressed, and that I needed to be more supportive. I saved the message, another piece of the pattern. Amanda wasn't looking for reconciliation anymore. She was looking for allies. At work, I stayed steady calm. Colleagues saw no difference. But inside, I was calculating the final steps. The silence had served its purpose. It had exposed Amanda's lies, revealed her panic, and stripped her of control. Now it was time to prepare for the end. That evening, Amanda confronted me again. She demanded to know if I planned to leave her. She shouted, cried, threw words like daggers. When none of them landed, she dropped to a whisper and asked if the baby was even mine. I looked at her once, steady and cold. I didn't answer. Her face broke in that silence. She covered her mouth, tears spilling, and stumbled out of the room. For the first time, she understood the weight of what had been hanging between us. Not anger, not revenge, just truth. The silence was no longer just mine. It was hers now too. And in that silence, everything she feared was already alive. On the 15th day, I made my first move outside the house. I scheduled a discreet meeting with a family lawyer downtown, the kind of man who spoke less than I did. I carried the binder with me, every page in order, every timestamp precise. He flipped through it without commentary, only nodding slowly as the pieces fell into place. When he finished, he closed the folder, leaned back in his chair, and said, "You've built a stronger case than most private investigators." I didn't feel pride, just confirmation. The system I had built was working. That afternoon, Amanda tried to catch me off guard. She greeted me at the door in tears, arms reaching for me, her belly pressing against mine as if to remind me what was at stake. She whispered that we could fix everything, that the baby needed both of us. Her performance might have worked weeks earlier. Not now. I placed my briefcase on the table and walked past her. Silence again. By the 16th day, Amanda grew bolder. She searched my office when she thought I wasn't home. I'd already anticipated it. The binder was gone, the laptop encrypted, the files duplicated across multiple drives and cloud accounts. Every move she made only reinforced how much she feared what I knew. That evening, she snapped. She cornered me in the kitchen, demanding to know why I wasn't speaking, why I was treating her like a stranger. She shouted that silence was cruel, that she would rather I screamed at her. But anger would have given her something to fight against. Silence left her fighting only herself. On the 17th day, I received a call from the clinic. The doctor wanted me to come in alone. His voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. When I arrived, he showed me the same ultrasound images again, pointing out the details Amanda had tried to bury. Timelines that didn't match. Measurements that couldn't be mine. He said nothing outright. Careful, professional. But the truth was clear. When I left the clinic, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I no longer wondered. I knew. That night, Amanda tried one last tactic. She said she was scared. She said she needed me. She pressed her hands into mine and whispered that I had to believe her. I let her hold them for a moment, then slowly pulled away. Silence again. Her face broke. She realized then that the fight was already over, and she had lost it without me raising my voice once. The truth was no longer a question. It was a verdict, and I was ready to deliver it. On the 18th day, I filed the papers. The lawyer had prepared everything: separation, custody arrangements pending DNA confirmation, financial disclosures. I signed each page without hesitation, my pen steady, my silence absolute. When it was finished, I felt no triumph, only relief. The process was in motion, and Amanda no longer had control of it. That evening, she sensed something had shifted. She paced the living room, restless, her phone clutched in her hand. She asked if I'd been with a lawyer. She asked if I was leaving. She asked if I would abandon her while she carried my child. Each question hit the same wall of silence. I didn't confirm, I didn't deny. I let her hear nothing but the echo of her own fear. By the 19th day, Amanda was unraveling publicly. Her mother called again, furious, accusing me of cruelty. She said Amanda was pregnant and vulnerable, that no decent man would treat his wife this way. I saved the voicemail, another brick in the wall of evidence. Amanda hadn't told her mother the truth. She hadn't told anyone. That lie was hers alone, and it was tightening around her. At work, I remained calm, efficient. No one suspected the storm brewing behind my silence. My colleagues saw me as steady, dependable. That facade was intentional. Amanda's chaos would not bleed into my reputation. That night, she broke down in front of me. She sobbed on the floor, clutching at my leg, begging me not to leave her. She promised she would cut off Ryan, promised the baby was mine, promised anything that might keep me from walking away. Her voice cracked under the weight of desperation. I didn't pull away, but I didn't console her either. I stood still until her grip weakened, until she realized tears weren't going to change the trajectory anymore. By the 20th day, the lawyer confirmed Amanda had been served. She called me over and over that afternoon, but I let the phone vibrate on my desk, each unanswered ring another line of silence cutting through the noise. When I returned home, she was waiting at the table, her face pale, the papers spread out before her. She demanded to know if I was serious. She screamed that I was destroying everything. She pleaded for another chance. I sat across from her, folded my hands, and gave her my first words in days. I didn't destroy anything. You did. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Her face drained of color, and for the first time, she stopped speaking. The silence between us was complete, absolute. And in that silence, she finally understood. The marriage was already gone. On the 21st day, the silence shifted from strategy to reality. The papers were in motion, the lawyer was handling details, and my path forward was set. Amanda still filled the house with noise, crying, pleading, accusations, but it no longer touched me. She wasn't speaking to me anymore. She was speaking to the silence, and the silence wasn't answering. That evening, she cornered me again. Her hands shook as she held the papers, her voice breaking as she asked if I understood what divorce meant, what it would do to us, what it would do to the baby. I let her speak until her words ran dry, then stood and walked out of the room. My silence was the signature she couldn't erase. By the 22nd day, Amanda tried another tactic. She called Ryan while I was in the house. She didn't know I was within earshot. Her voice was low, panicked, telling him everything was falling apart, that I had proof, that I wasn't speaking to her. She begged him not to abandon her. I recorded the call. Proof again. That night, I transferred the last of our shared accounts into a separate one under my name. The lawyer had told me to secure finances before Amanda made a move. She hadn't yet, but I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Quiet action, precise timing. On the 23rd day, Amanda's mother showed up unannounced. She banged on the door until I let her in. She stormed through the house, accusing me of cruelty, saying Amanda was terrified, saying no man should treat a pregnant wife this way. I didn't argue. I simply handed her the ultrasound report, the first piece of proof. She scanned it, confusion spreading across her face. She looked at Amanda, then back at me, her words faltering. I took the report back without a word. The silence that followed was heavier than any defense I could have given. Amanda avoided me for the rest of that night. She stayed in the bedroom with the lights off. The house was quiet, not because I forced it, but because she had finally run out of noise. On the 24th day, I received a call from the lawyer. The next steps were scheduled. Hearings, filings, custody arrangements. It was all moving forward. When I hung up, I sat in the living room, staring at the empty space Amanda had tried to fill with lies. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. Amanda came out of the bedroom late that night, her face pale, her voice small. She asked if there was anything she could do to stop this. I looked at her once and answered with silence. Her shoulders sagged. She understood then. The silence was permanent. The marriage was already buried, and the final act was almost here. On the 25th day, the silence became final. The judge's signature on the papers turned absence into law. Divorce. Custody pending. Assets divided. Amanda's name was still on the documents, but her control was gone. The system I'd built, quiet, deliberate, undeniable, had carried me all the way here. When I left the courthouse, Amanda was waiting on the steps. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She reached for me once, as if touch could undo what silence had done. I stepped aside, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with clarity. That night, I packed the last of my things. The house was stripped bare of meaning, just walls, furniture, echoes of arguments that no longer mattered. Amanda sat in the corner of the living room, silent for the first time in weeks. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just stared at the floor. The silence was hers now. I placed the binder on the table between us. Not to threaten, not to gloat, just to leave behind the record. Proof of every step, every lie, every moment she thought she could bury in noise. She looked at it, but didn't touch it. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but no words came. I picked up my bag, walked out, and closed the door behind me. The air outside was cold, sharp. It felt like a reset, the kind you only get after a storm finally burns itself out. For weeks, Amanda had filled every corner of our lives with chaos. My silence had absorbed it, broken it down, and left only truth standing. Driving away, I thought about the doctor's shaking hands, the ultrasound that started it all. He had whispered for me to call a lawyer. I hadn't understood then, but I understood now. He wasn't just warning me about what he saw on the screen. He was warning me about what I would see if I kept my eyes open. Some men fight loud. They demand answers, throw accusations, raise their voices until walls shake. That was never me. I learned that silence can cut deeper than rage. It forces lies into the light, exposes weakness, and leaves no room for denial. Weeks later, I moved into a quiet apartment on the edge of the city. No noise, no pleading, no chaos. Just the hum of the fridge, the soft creak of the floorboards, and the sound of my own breathing. Peace doesn't announce itself, it arrives in silence. Amanda was gone. The marriage was gone. The noise was gone. What remained was clarity, and the silence that had carried me through it all. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.